Life Fixers, hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to improve your relationship by cutting down your work hours? Yup, that's what we're talking about today. Thursday is the new Friday, or just working less. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? And being more productive at the same time. However, I'm going to put a disclaimer. Your mindset might be getting in your way of being productive. There might be something that you'll be listening to this episode and you're going to say, hey, this is not for me. And that is stopping you from really going and accomplishing what you want to do. If you want to see where your mindset is and how you can actually go and improve it, go to lifefixuniversity.com/mindset to take the assessment to see where your mindset is. lifefixuniversity.com/mindset. Well, super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Joe. You want to start by telling us what was something you did as a kid that your parents still laugh about till today?
Oh man, so many things, I'm sure. I would imagine that they probably laugh at how when I was 5 years old, I started a Kool-Aid stand and I hired the whole neighborhood and outsourced it so I didn't have to work. And so I had like a little army of 6 kids running the stand for a couple days, and I just sat around.
Okay, so that explains exactly why you do what you do today.
Yeah, you would have thought I would have gone into business or all these other things, but it's I was kind of businessy as a kid, and then I just went off into psychology and then rediscovered enjoying business later on.
Yeah, but you turned your psychology into business, no?
Yeah. So I had a counseling private practice for a number of years. I sold that in 2019. But then through that process, realized how little I knew about business. So I had actually opened that up in 2009 and just was reading business books and why didn't I learn this in grad school? Basics of marketing or websites or, we learn all these other things in grad school about being good clinically, even about running nonprofits and working at community mental health, but there was no talk of private practice. So I just started learning and then podcasting about it. And so over time, you pick up enough tips that people say, hey, I want to hire you. And so then was able to develop this whole business around helping people start private practices.
Yeah. The best way to learn, right? Podcasting. I love this. You literally get to speak one-on-one and ask all those questions that you don't get to speak in other places. But when you're podcasting, one of the reasons why I love podcasting so much. Okay, but now you've moved on again to Thursday's the new Friday. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes, similar to the whole Kool-Aid stand thing, it's a returning home more than a trajectory. I remember my freshman year of college orientation, we're all sitting around and the academic advisor said, all right, we're going to make your schedules now. I'm like, great. And I raised my hand and said, do I have to go to class on Friday? And she's like, no, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. So I did a 4-day week then. Throughout all of my undergrad and grad school, I only had one class on Friday, and that was a mandatory class that was only offered on Fridays. And so as I entered into the work world, I did the typical 40-hour-a-week job, and then, plus and lots of on-call, was foster care supervisor, worked at a community college, but then started these side gigs over time. And then when I ended up leaving that full-time job, I really did an experiment that first summer that I had left the full-time job and said, well, I'm going to go back to the 4-day work week and just see how that goes. And it really was an experiment, which I would say is really the model that I teach a lot of, that it's not prescriptive saying, here's exactly how you do it. You're either in or you're out. Instead, it's here's a menu. You're a smart person. Let's do some experiments, get some data on yourself of how to apply these things, and then apply it in a way that is strategic and kind of mirrors the research while also saying you're your own unique person. So I did this experiment where the 4-day week was working great. And then after that summer, I said, well, I'm going to keep that as a permanent part of my schedule because every month was financially better than the month before. And so then have kept doing these time experiments to see how little I can work while also maximizing the profits and the impact of the work that I do.
Okay, so if somebody wants to test this and experiment it themselves, what sort of strategies or thought processes have to go into place so they make sure that they're working at it for themselves?
Yeah. So for your question, do you mean an individual solopreneur business owner or someone that's in a typical job? Because there's different strategies based on which environment you're in.
Can we give for both type of people?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So if you're a solopreneur business owner, you're mostly in charge of your own schedule. The problem that you probably deal with is that you have too many ideas, that you love what you're doing. And you're doing your own thing. And so It's not that you hate it typically. Usually it's you love it so much that you want to do it all the time. And so your family, your friends, maybe are constantly hearing you talk about it, and you don't have clear boundaries around when you think about work and when you don't think about work. So number one, we want to start having hard and soft boundaries for those people. So what are some hard boundaries that are always true? So for example, I wrote a book about not working on Friday. So if I have a consulting client that, we're doing our pre-consulting call, they're seeing if they want to work with me, and they say, I can only meet with you on Fridays. I will never work with that person because I know that I'm always going to be working on a Friday when I wrote a book about not working on Friday. I'm not going to make that hypocritical move. Now, if my director of details, Jess, if she sends me a text message on Friday morning and says, the website's on fire, like things are going crazy, I'm not going to be like, just hang tight till Monday, let it burn. Like I'm going to put out that fire.
Don't be stupid. Exactly.
Right. But then, the next week we're going to reverse engineer, like what happened there? Why did it happen? Why did Joe have to be involved in that? Could someone else have taken care of that? What can we learn from that? How do we then, prevent that in the future while knowing that there's going to be fires that happen that we just can't foresee? So I would say hard boundaries like that, soft boundaries, and then also figuring out.
Hold on, let me just cut you there on that. Do Joe about why did Joe have to be involved in that? Does that mean that your employees do work on Friday?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have people that are listening to the podcast and that are doing all sorts of things, 7 days a week. And so I encourage my staff to make the schedule that implements Thursday as the new Friday. But to me, taking Fridays off and having a 3-day weekend is more of a metaphor for where we need to move. And so, yes, a 4-day work week works for lots of people. But for some of my staff, they want to have more of a flexible schedule. They want to be able to work on a Friday. They want to be able to check emails on a Saturday night because that works for their family. So at its core, it's not saying, here's the prescriptive model in the same way maybe the industrialists said, this is how you do it, or you're a robot, move on. It's saying we need to have more of an organic evolutionary model where the staff gets to lead what they feel is healthiest for them. And so being able to have those conversations as a staff, we frequently go through kind of a 3-step process of first, like, what do you love that you're doing that you want to keep doing? Second, what do you hate doing that you want to take off your plate? And third, how do you want to grow or learn in a new way? So maybe you want to learn video editing, or maybe you want to learn social media management, growing into the position that you want. And so really giving the staff the autonomy to say, here's the schedule I want. Here is the direction that I want for my tasks. Here's what I want to remove from my plate, while recognizing that may not be immediate, but okay, so we're hiring someone new to do the podcast show notes because you hate doing that now. Thank you for telling me that. I don't want you to hate doing the show notes. So giving the staff that ability, while also me recognizing, listen, it seems like you haven't taken as much of a break recently as maybe you should. Why don't you take a few days off to encourage, kind of as a coach or a cheerleader for them to recognize maybe you are working too hard and not stepping back.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for that. Okay. So back to what you're saying. If someone, what you're saying.
Yeah. So hard and soft boundaries. And then I think being able to capture these ideas, because especially as entrepreneurs, we have ideas all the time. And so having a system of how you do that so that, like, I'm not playing with my daughters and then it's like, hold on, I got to go write a blog post. No, I need to have a way that I capture that idea in a note on my phone or an audio memo or in Trello, where I capture it, but then I go back to my life and that I don't just get sucked back in. So understanding that probably checking email at 9:00 at night after the kids are in bed isn't the healthiest thing for you or your relationships, and being able to say, okay, I have some hard boundaries. After 6:00, daddy's home and we're going to play Mario Kart. We're going to go for a hike. We're going to do an art project. The kids then know that dad is home and that they're not going to be interrupting work and that they can say, Dad, what are you doing on your phone? Like, are you working? Like, that they're allowed to do those things and say those things to pull me kind of out of that as well. So that would be the entrepreneur mindset. The people that work for someone else, it's a much different endeavor when we're looking at the 4-day work week. Because you have people that are power brokers that are deciding for you what your schedule looks like. So frequently what that looks like is having a conversation with your boss about doing an experiment over a period of time. So usually doing this with at least 2 other people. So you have a group of 3 that can talk to your boss about doing an experiment for 2 to 3 months. So I have a whole article that walks through this that just went live on Harvard Business Review. And so we can reference that in the show notes to give the actual script. But the big picture overview of it is, first you want to look at what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators for that group of 3 to up to 8 people. So you want a group that's smaller than 8 and usually, somewhere above 3. Because then you have more than just you that's a part of it. So what are the KPIs for this team? So how are we already judging success with this team? Is it the amount of sales they make? Are you doing customer service? Are you doing some sort of accounting report? So number of reports per week. Is it an IT team that is helping people when they're locked out with their passwords? So figuring out what are the big picture things that are indicators of success for that team. So then working with that supervisor to say, we would like to do a 4-day work week as an experiment for the next 2 to 3 months. Here's how we're going to report out to you in regards to these KPIs. If this works really well, that makes you look innovative as a boss. It makes you be someone that shows that you're willing to try to do things to make your staff happier and stay here longer. So, I mean, this boss needs to have something in it for them as well. So then the first conversation that team needs to have after they're allowed to do this experiment is, what is the culture of this team going to be? So, for example, are we going to email at all or go onto Slack after 6 o'clock or after 5 o'clock? Or are we done? Are there things that we need to troubleshoot now before it becomes a problem? So say you have an IT team, you can't just be like, you know what, our whole team is off for the weekend. Sorry, you're locked out with your password. You probably need to have someone that's on call. So maybe you're on call every third weekend, for that IT team. So you're troubleshooting as much of that as you can. Because when this falls apart is when, Jim on Wednesday night sends an email at 10 and 2 people read that email and respond to it. And then you come into the office Thursday morning and you're out of the loop. That is where it falls apart, where people just get sucked back into this old way of working. So we need to create the culture of slowing down and what that actually looks like for this team. So then you enact the experiment on the first day of the week. So for most people, that's Monday morning. You have a conversation first about how well you slowed down in the previous week. So did Jim send that email at 10 o'clock on Wednesday? We need to talk about, maybe that was an essential email that did need to be, read by everybody. So we need to change our rules. Or maybe Jim was acting inappropriately based on the culture we're trying to create. So we want to have those conversations about how well we slowed down. Then we want to report out the KPIs to that supervisor and saying, we're up 2% in sales, we're down 3% in sales. Here's our action items for this week to pull that up to at least baseline, if not better than baseline. And then every month, you're going to do a 360 review of it, where you give a report to that supervisor saying, here's what we're seeing in regards to the actual numbers, but also here's what our team is feeling. So we're feeling like we love our jobs more than ever, that we wouldn't want to leave this job, that we're feeling satisfied and we're feeling like we're connected with our families. So you're giving a big picture of both the qualitative and the quantitative within that report. And then at the very end, you're going to bring together all of those reports to have a solid document. Your supervisor, if backed into the corner, say their boss says, I heard you did this 4-day work week without my permission, they can then say, here's this report on all the positive things that happened as a result of it. We want to do a second experiment actually, and maybe look at doing this as our long-term vision.
I cannot see that happening in a big corporate office, and a little small thing, maybe you can negotiate that with your boss. But do you have any clients or any real stories of people that did do this in big places?
Yeah. So what I love about the story I'm about to tell you is it's in one of the most unlikely places. So Kalamazoo Valley Community College is this community college in Southwest Michigan. Colleges and universities are very slow to innovate when it comes to HR,
anything,
schedules, anything at all. So this guy, Ted Forrester, he was an HVAC instructor. So he's teaching students how to run air conditioning, heating, very blue collar, likable guy. Students love him. He notices in the summertime that on Fridays, there's very few students that are on campus. So he goes up every Friday to the roof because, he has access to the roof, takes pictures of the entire parking lot all summer long. He then goes to the board of directors and he says, okay, this is what every Friday looked like this summer. He goes through all the pictures. Clearly, there's very few students on campus. I want to propose to you that we close down on Fridays in the summertime, because here's the millions of dollars in air conditioning costs that we will save. So
yes,
for now, over
the best
4
way
years,
to get them.
right. For over 4 years now, KVCC has been doing summers that are 4-day work weeks, and they aren't doing 40 hours. They're doing 36 hours over 4 days. HR quote donates 4 hours. But what we're seeing is that because of that, students are happier because, these offices are open earlier in the day and later because people have a flexible schedule. Like say their kid has, baseball and they have to be leaving at 4, they may come in earlier at 7:30. So these offices are open longer. We see that the health outcomes are better. So the actual cost of health insurance is going down for KVCC. As well, we see that longevity of staying in positions is going up because, who doesn't want to have someone stay in a position? Because if you have someone leave, it takes 6 to 12 months to even get someone back up to that same level of productivity. So there's all these extra benefits on top of the millions of dollars that they've saved in AC costs. And so we see companies like Nissan, who just did a bulk book buy of my book, evaluating this, that we're walking through these experiments where people say, there's no way that we can do this. That's because people are still thinking like the industrialists. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the average person was working 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So in 1926, when Henry Ford said, I'm doing a 40-hour work week, that was a huge step forward for the evolution of business and people. So less than 100 years ago, we get the 40-hour work week. But Henry Ford did it to sell cars. He wanted to sell more cars to his own employees, knowing that they wouldn't buy a car to get to work faster. But instead, if they had a weekend where they could go do fun things, they'd buy a car to go do more fun things. And it worked.
Is that why he did it?
It's totally, there's all these quotes I have in the book where his actual quotes of saying, this is to sell more cars to my employees. Like, it's just mind-boggling.
That is so cool.
Transparent he was about
genius brain.
He just wanted to make money. And so less than 100 years ago, we see this 40-hour work week. And I would actually say that there are still so many people in leadership that have that industrialist mindset, that think about people as robots. They aren't evolving, that they just want butts back in the chair for 40 hours, but they don't care about outcomes. Smart businesses are the ones that are switching over to more of an evolutionary model. That idea of people changing and shifting within their positions, that it's not just bullet points you follow, and if you want to make more money, you become a supervisor. It's that you can actually grow and shape that position. And so when I hear people push back and say, well, big companies will never do this, you're right. There are some companies that are pure industrialists. They're never going to do it. You then, as an employee of those companies, need to say, do I want to work for an industrialist? Someone that can't look at the pandemic and say, we've learned a lot from that old way is dead, and that we're the post-pandemic generation that gets to say, what am I doing here? We see this great resignation because of those industrialist leaders that aren't changing, they aren't shaping, they aren't reshifting the way that we think about the way we do time. And so I would actually argue that, less than 100 years ago, one power broker, this white male, said, here's how it's going to go, and it shifted society. How much more can we do if we collectively work together and say, a 4-day work week is the max that we should be working if we want to increase productivity, health, mental health outcomes, all of those things. The 4-day work week is that natural next step for our generation.
Yeah. I like that so much. Okay. So what are the actual benefits? I could see health. Everyone could say yeah, totally. That is why. But for 4 days, a day less of work, obviously I'm going to be healthier. But what are the actual benefits, maybe on a personal level, in marriage and with family?
Yeah. So even just looking at my own life in regards to me and my kids, for us to be able to have time and flexibility to not have the weekend be a stress. Most people, work 40 plus hours a week. You include, pre-pandemic commutes on top of that. You're getting a couple hours with your kids a night, if you're lucky. And that's not even counting gymnastics and soccer practice and piano and all those other stressors. So by taking that extra day off, say the kids stay in school on Fridays and they still have that traditional industrialist schedule. What could
Although maybe that might change one day.
Absolutely. There's lots of school districts that are pushing back on that, and they're doing 4-day weeks now. Imagine that, say they are in school on that Friday. What would you get done so that Saturday and Sunday could be as much fun as a family? It could be connecting with you and your partner, you and your kids, you and your neighbors. Well, you'd probably get your grocery shopping done. You might mow your lawn. You might decide to outsource that stuff. You might clean up the house, so then you feel like you're a little more peaceful going into the weekend. By having that time, you're giving yourself a full extra day to get a lot of that adulting done. And not that you even have to spend all of that time adulting. You could choose to just, I'm going to take a meditation class on Fridays. I'm going to take a yoga class so that I'm more centered when my kids get home and when I enter into the weekend. It's switching to have more intention around how we slow down, so that the time that we're slowing down is higher quality, but then also the time that we're working is higher quality. And so on both sides, it's adding creativity and productivity, but we're then being more intentional on how we're spending that time.
Yeah, so you're really, really planning beforehand. Okay, I want my Saturday and Sundays free. So what am I going to do on Friday to make my Saturdays and Sundays more enjoyable. Or back also at work, I want to be able to be off on Friday. So what do I have to accomplish during these 4 days so that way I could get off?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, whoa, that's so overwhelming to plan all that. And I always encourage people, add one thing and subtract one thing. So just start with looking at your weekend and say, what's one thing that I can add in that I know is going to give me life and excitement? I mean, it could be a hike with your kids. It could be, going on a date with your partner and having it be a different kind of date, not just your typical one that you always do. It could be, we're going to have a family over that, we're going to have a barbecue outside and connect with them. We haven't connected with them in a while. So find that one thing that's going to boost your life over the weekend. And then what's the one thing that you can remove from your weekend? And so what's that stressor? I mean, it could be you're planning to have coffee with a friend that is kind of a toxic friend, and you always leave feeling kind of trashy after you hang out with them. I give you permission to not have coffee with that person. It could be that, you have to mow your lawn and you just hate doing that. And the neighborhood would love to do it for $30. It could be that you really don't want to spend 3 hours going grocery shopping. And so you have those delivered to your house and it costs a little bit of money, but it just removes that extra stress. Now, I'm not saying you have to outsource everything. And I know everyone has different levels of income, but to just say, what's one thing that I'm going to add in that's going to boost life? And what's one thing I'm going to remove that's going to allow me to feel more centered and grounded for my weekend so that in entering that next week, I'm actually recovered and rejuvenated and excited to go into work.
Okay, that's really interesting. I like that. Subtract one, take away one. That seems like way more manageable than like being able to tell people, okay, plan everything. But what about during the actual work week? Does that become way more stressful because it's one less day?
So actually what we see happening is when you work one less day, it doesn't mean that you have a 20% drop in your productivity. We would think that if we just take one away, that's a 20% drop. So already Friday is a half worked day. It's when we have birthday parties, wedding showers, baby showers, stupid team building activities that don't work. It's like that's the day that we just put in all that junk that really isn't helping the bottom line. So if we just start with that, you're not losing 20%. In fact, what's happening is, so say you have 20 different items that you're supposed to do in a week, and you only now can get 14 done. Are you going to get the best 14 done or the worst 14? You're going to get the best 14 done, right? And so it forces you to drop the ball. You want to drop the ball because that gives you data in a number of different areas. So imagine you're a small business owner and you move to a 4-day work week and you keep forgetting to take out the trash and you keep forgetting to vacuum and your office is getting dusty and looks gross. Well, that gives you some data of what you probably shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be cleaning your office. You should be outsourcing that. That's not a great use of your time as the business owner. And so over time, you start to realize, what is the highest use of my time? Because you're naturally going to do the best use of your time. You're going to do client work that brings in money. You're going to do sales calls. You're going to do billing to make sure you get paid. You're going to do all these things, that actually help the business. And then when you're only doing that, you start to scale at a different level, working fewer days a week.
Wow. Yeah. I really like that. So many people like just get so overwhelmed by like everything that's going on and are procrastinating a lot and like working on those little things that don't really need to be like spent time on and like wasted time on. So this like literally forces people like, okay, focus on what's important, drop what's not, and you'll see way more productive. And that's probably why you were able to see for yourself in the beginning, even when you were just experiencing this, like how your profits went up month after month, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think people sometimes overthink it where they think it's got to be this huge shift. You can just say, okay, every other week I'm going to be done at noon on Friday. That's a step forward. I'll do that twice a month. Actually, the University of Illinois did this really interesting study that was evaluating vigilance decrement. So vigilance, how well we pay attention to something, decrement meaning going down over time. So they were looking at really boring tasks. How do people stay attentive to those tasks? And when does it really go down in regards to their attention? And so they started with these students that would come in, they were given a 4-digit number. And so say it was 4312. And so they looked at a computer screen and they had all these random 4-digit numbers coming up. And then when 4312 comes up, they'd click a button. All the other numbers you ignore. So for an hour, they just click, sit and watch, click. So boring for an hour. they experienced vigilance decrement, meaning at the end of that time, they paid attention worse than the beginning. Like we would all expect that we would zone out from that stupid task. Now imagine, so then the second group, what happens is they put them in front of the screen, same exact thing, 4-digit number, click the button. But at the 1/3 mark, they gave them a 1-minute break. They said something like, we put you on the wrong computer. We got to set you up on a different computer. Just hang out in the lobby. They didn't have their phones. They didn't have screens. It was just a 1-minute quick break. Then they came back. They did another third of that hour. And then they gave them another 1-minute break. Same sort of thing. Sorry, put you back on the original computer, whatever the reason was. And then they finished out. They experienced 0 vigilance decrement, meaning at the end of that time, they paid attention just as well as they did in the beginning. So why is that in the brain? If you think about how the brain has evolved, it's still a really old organ in our body. We can trick it to do things, even though we're not really scared or fearful as much as maybe when we lived in kind of different environments. So imagine you've been walking through the jungle thousands of years ago. You've been told there's a tiger there. For 20 years, you've never seen a tiger. None of your friends have seen a tiger. You're not going to be as vigilant about a tiger as you would on day one of being told there's a tiger there. In fact, your brain evolved in such a way that you shouldn't be vigilant for 20 years over a tiger, because that's going to slow you down from gathering other food or, go getting other things. You need to not be vigilant for that. But imagine then a different situation where your best friend was just chased by a tiger the day before, barely got away, came back and told you this story of survival. You're going to pay attention for tigers. And in the same way, our brain, when we get that disruption in the middle of a boring task, it then comes back with new eyes. In the same way that that tiger kind of resets us, same sort of thing happens just by changing our environment. And there's all this emerging neuroscience of how we work that actually helps us so that once we've optimized our brain by slowing down, we can actually absolutely kill it when we come into work by using the neuroscience.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, a lot of sense, especially with all the work I do on the brain. I'm like, okay, that's true. Yeah. Okay, so before we get to our final question, where could life fixers connect with you and find out more about you?
Yeah, so my website, joesanok.com, is the central hub for all of my keynotes and my books. So Thursday is the New Friday is available through that. They can also find the book wherever they buy their books. So they can pre-order through a local bookstore. They can purchase it through Amazon, wherever they like to get books. And then if people buy more than 5 books, we have a bunch of bulk book offerings where we have a mastermind group and discussions. And they can just submit their receipt over at thursdaysthenewfriday.com to join those mastermind groups.
Awesome. Okay, so for our final question, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, trust, or connection?
I would say when you can authentically be yourself, meaning you wake up or are around that person without showering or doing anything to prep yourself, that you can be your ugly, you can be your authentic, you can be your full trashy self, who you really are, and then recognize that you're doing your best and they're doing their best and you still want to be together.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Joe. This was amazing getting to speak with you. And I really hope that people cut down their hours at work. Maybe me, myself, but it's going to be hard.
That's all for this episode of the Life Fix University podcast, but I have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support the show, but will also help the people you love most. We are striving for 1 million downloads by the end of 2025, and we can't do this without your help. If you love this episode, please share it with 2 of your family and friends so they too can rewire their brains to have an extraordinary marriage. It was awesome spending time with you, and I'll see you on the next episode.